This week in the Regency, I was going to talk about horses because it's the first week of August and it's horses' birthdays and all that kind of stuff. But then I came across a fantastic story and I thought, no, I have to do this instead. We could do horses another time. So at the moment, I'm writing a Regency murder mystery. Title's still being debated with my publisher. And so one of the things that happens in that is that a magistrate from Bow Street comes to the country house for various reasons, mainly that all the magistrates of the district are in fact suspects. So I thought, I'll talk about Bow Street, because that's quite interesting. So I looked for a story, and there were I thought easy to find a story because every week there was a column in the Police called Police in a lot of different newspapers. So I looked for the London newspapers, I looked for Bow Street, and I came across The King versus Lord Boyle. On Saturday afternoon, between 3 and 4 o'clock, a chaise and four drove to the office, and a tall young man of genteel appearance got out and entered the office. And now this is the office of Bow Street. This is what it looked like. And Bow Street, there was no real police force as such, but Bow Street was the closest thing that London had at that point. And it was the Magistrates Court for Middlesex, which is the county in which London sits. And they had Bow Street runners who were more like court officers than they were detectives, but their role changed over time into being detectives. They were established in the first place by Henry Fielding, the author, and he was the chief magistrate. And he decided things had to be more organized for various reasons. This guy just turns up, and one of the things about it is that because there's no kind of investigative force, the way magistrates found out about crime typically was that either the village constables, the parish constables arrested people for being drunk and disorderly, or somebody who'd had something stolen, somebody who'd had been assaulted or whatever, they would come to the magistrate's office and they would lay a charge. It's not unusual for someone to just turn up. A tall young man of genteel appearance got out and entered the office. He stated that he had been extremely ill-treated by some persons and wished them to be taken into custody. There was no magistrate sitting. He was informed that if he would call again in the evening, a magistrate would be sitting, because that's when all the drunks come out. And so they had night court sessions. This by no means satisfied him. He abused those belonging to the office and made so great a noise that a mob soon collected in the streets. So it must have been quite a lot of noise. He struck some of the officers. The chaise continued at the door for a considerable time. The account the drivers gave of their fare was that he had hired the chaise of their master in Swallow Street to go to Dartford, but ordered them first to drive to Newgate. Now, Newgate was a prison, which prison he entered and remained in it a considerable time. And they understood he had given some money away there and had drank very freely. Okay, so he's drunk by the time he turns up. When he came out of Newgate, he ordered them to drive to Bow Street office. And as he declared he would wait there till the evening, when a magistrate would be sitting, the boys requested to be discharged, that is, pay us off, which he refused doing for some time, but was at length prevailed upon by some persons when he gave each of the post boys a banknote. Now, remember, banknotes are really quite rare at this point, and certainly not something that you'd give a postilion, which we understood to be the amount of £10. £8 each. They then left the office. Now, at this point, I'm going, oh, he's not just drunk, he's completely wasted. If he's given away £20, it's a huge amount of money. They then left the office. I'll bet they did. The young man continued in the office for some time, abusing the officers, calling them thieves, pickpockets, and other names. And after continuing this conduct for some time, he left the office, but returned again in a hackney coach and renewed his violence, which of course collected a crowd of people. A boy, one of the bystanders, began talking with him, you can imagine, for which he was reproved by S. Lack, a patrol. That is, he's one of the Bow Street patrollers. And so at this point, by this time, Bow Street was starting to edge into that territory that we think of as policing, and they would go out and patrol. So the boys kind of have a go at the young man, and as Lack goes, don't do that to the boy. The young man seized Lack, got his hand between his neckcloth, and being very tall and powerful, Lack was nearly choked, and told him if he did not loose him, he would strike him with a stick he had in his hand. Now, that would have been his baton. They all had batons, to which the other replied that he was Lord Boyle, the son of the Earl of Glasgow, and dared Lack to strike him. Well, Lord Boyle, the son of the Earl of Glasgow. Obviously, at this point, I went off looking for Lord Boyle, the son of the Earl of Glasgow. I could not find any pictures of him. However, I did find George Boyle, his dad, and he was indeed the Earl of Glasgow. Now, a cynical person might think that this guy was just making it up. But no, he really was Lord Boyle. Disgust and how dare you, sir, to the patrol officer, shows very much the kind of attitude that the nobility had towards ordinary people. Persons coming to Lack's assistance, so everybody piled on, he was obliged to let go his hold, and finding himself overcome, he called for the watch, although it was yet daylight. Okay, so what does that mean? There was the Bow Street runners, there were the village constables, and then there was the night watch, which each council parish, so London's divided into parishes at this point. They were the forerunners of council areas, and they employed night watchmen, and they were the people who hold the, they and the village constables. The village constables often went to bed just and let the night watchmen get on with it, and they were the people who hauled drunk and disorderly people off to the magistrates' court. He wanted the night watch to actually arrest one of the Bow Street runners. He still continued in the office. They can't get rid of him. They can't get him to leave. A little before 7 o'clock, Sir Nathaniel Conant, now this is, Sir Nathaniel is in fact the chief magistrate at this time. Mr. Richardson, another magistrate, arrived at the office. Lord Boyle took his seat at the table when, instead of stating any cause for his originally coming to the office, so I've forgotten all about that, he addressed the bench, making a long charge against Lack, during which he made use of scurrilous language towards the persons belonging to the office, which caused Mr. Stafford, the chief clerk, to reprove him. I'm not surprised. This, however, had not the desired effect, so he must be really drunk to have stayed this bad this long, or he was just a complete horrible person. Had not the desired effect, for he attacked Mr. Stafford most vehemently and challenged him to fight. He then proceeded with his charge against Lack, in which he urged that the nobility must be supported against such fellows. To which Mr. Richardson replied that there was no distinction of persons there. The laws were for all who transgressed them, Whereupon his lordship seized Mr. Richardson, pulled him off his seat, insisted upon his going out to fight with him, but which Mr. Richardson, of course, declined. His lordship then went on with his charge against Lack, and the officer being called upon to answer the complaint, his defence was, of course, most satisfactory. His lordship, that would be Lord Boyle, his lordship said he should complain to Lord Castlereagh of the treatment he had experienced there. Lord Castlereagh was a member of the government. I'm pretty sure he was Foreign Secretary at this point. Sir Nathaniel Conant told him he did not know that he had anything to complain of. For if Lord Castlereagh or any other noble lord was brought before him for similar conduct, he must hold him amenable to the law. He, Sir Nathaniel Conant, considered as outrageous Lord Boyle's attack upon the officer, who had endeavoured to prevent him from being made a subject of ridicule by a boy. So we are clear on what the boy was saying. He therefore found it his duty to hold his lordship to bail to answer the complaint of Lack at the session. His lordship was admitted to bail, himself in £40, so he had to pay £40, and to produce two sureties, that is, two people who would guarantee that he would turn up to court. Two sureties this day, like you're not getting out of here until two people speak up for you. His lordship said Lord Castlereagh would be one of his bails. I obviously went looking for the actual trial immediately. And so we have the King versus Lord Boyle. I'm not going to go read the whole trial thing because it was reported quite differently in different newspapers. In order to understand what happens next in the trial, you have to know where we are in terms of the Napoleonic Wars. Now, Napoleon at this point in August 1814 is on Elba. He's been defeated, they think, completely. Nobody knows he's coming back. And so there's enormous celebrations happening in London all through summer. What's also happening is that the people who were kept as prisoners of war by the French have been released. It's part of the Treaty of Paris. And an obvious part, when you win the war, you get your guys back, right? So one newspaper article goes, it appeared that the defendant was in the Navy and having been released from a French prison upon the late peace, had got intoxicated on an illumination night in London and had committed some assault. Okay, so putting it all together, he'd been a prisoner of war. We don't know for how long, but it could have been for quite some time because the French wars had been going on for a long time. And so when we come to the trial, it's clear that nobody wants to put him in prison. And primarily they don't want to put him in prison because he's just been let out of a French prison. He's a prisoner of war. He naturally got drunk, as you do. So it seems to me that what happened was they all got drunk. Some of his friends got arrested and taken off to Newgate. And he went there because in those prisons, how you were treated depended on how much money you had. And so he went to Newgate to give them some money so that they could buy food. You didn't necessarily get fed. And while he was there, he got into a fight probably with the jailers. And then he went to Bow Street. And so nobody wants to put him in jail. He's just got out of a French prison. But they're in a bit of a bind. There's common assault, like he did against Lack, and they can kind of finagle that. But then there's assault against an officer of the court, which is what he did when he assaulted Mr. Richardson. So they had to kind of massage that. It did not appear that the defendant knew the prosecutor was a magistrate in the execution of his duty, which is the key element, when he assaulted him, so that he could only be convicted of a common assault. But it did appear most plainly that he was very drunk and had offered an ample apology by his attorney. And you see how they've italicized by his attorney, because that's just not good enough. But Lord Ellenborough held the assault committed, that is, he's guilty, and that a gentleman, and in this case he's referring to Richardson, who had had his feelings wounded by one, however noble, was entitled to expect that that nobleman should descend from his rank and make a personal reparation to those wounded feelings. So Richardson, by virtue of his employment in the court, and they only employ gentlemen basically as magistrates, I mean that's it, was a gentleman, not he was a commoner, not a noble, but he was a gentleman, and as such should have been respected. And therefore, Lord Boyle has to make a personal reparation to those wounded feelings. The defendant was therefore, under his lordship's directions, found guilty. But his lordship hoped that before the next term such an arrangement would be made as that the court should hear no more of the case. I think this is fascinating, because it goes to show how private justice was. So what they therefore expected, clearly expected, was that Lord Boyle would apologise in person to Mr. Richardson. They'd shake hands, and that part of the case would just go away. And that he would pay Lack off. He would give Lack a douceur in order to drop the case. I'm hoping quite a lot of money, given that he handed out £10 to the post boys without thinking about it. So, you could expect Lack to get a reasonable amount. So did the trial ever come back? Not that it was reported. So he made that apology and he made that payoff, and he was allowed to go on his merry way, because that's how it worked. And the next time we hear from him is a year later, in summer of 1815, in the arrivals column of the Morning Post. So they used to say who's arrived and who hasn't in London, who's departed, who's come. Lord Boyle in North Audley Street, Grosvenor Square. So he was a rambunctious young man of high temper and with a good opinion of himself. This whole thing to me was really emblematic of the attitudes the nobles had towards commoners. He wanted to sit in Richardson's chair, and so he just grabbed Richardson and hauled him out of it. But the basic thing was he was drunk, he was entitled, he thought everybody should bow down before him. So I feel it's fascinating to see how justice worked at this point and how private it was, and how often the courts pushed it back to the people to sort it out for themselves. Particularly, of course, if the person charged happened to be noble, who could pay people off. Well, that's this week in the Regency. A little more exciting than I thought it was going to be. I'm Elizabeth Layden. I'll see you next week in the Regency.